we did an emergency podcast the other day after Davante Adams got traded to the Raiders by the Packers. And just a wild, wild story. And I think, the last few days have been spent by us, at least, with Raider fans that we see or that are in our DMs declaring the I wouldn't say they're declaring the AFC West won, but understandably they're pretty fired up. Hell, I'm pretty fired up for them. I think this is going to be one of the biggest stories in the NFL this year, partly because it's Davante, partly because they got Chandler. It's Josh McDaniels' return, and who knows, by the time the season starts, Derek Carr might have a new contract. It's pretty incredible the amount of attention, deserved attention, the Raiders are going to be getting for the next several months.
Do you know who else is really fired up? The Fresno
Mark
State
Davis?
football Twitter accounts and Instagram accounts, and just the program. Like, it's a really big deal for the football program to have these two guys combined, right? I mean, it's the two best players in the NFL from the program, and now they're fucking teammates, and they're best friends, and they have some of the most historic moments with the thing. I just think that we were talking about before we hopped on, the hype on this team is going to be bigger than it's been since Derek's been there. And I think it exceeds anything Gruden had, because I think it was pretty clear early on. A lot of people didn't take Gruden that seriously after he made some moves and some of his early draft picks. People kind of pulled back before he'd ever had won any games. In those first couple of years, I think people's opinions of him changed fast. Now Del Rio made the playoffs, and the expectations on that team returning the next year were really high.
Yeah.
Talking about winning the division, talking about being a Super Bowl type team. Now Derek was coming off a major injury, but by the time training camp happened, he was healthy. But that was a disaster. I mean, a complete disaster of a season. And ultimately, Jack Del Rio got fired at the end of the season for John Gruden. And you have to wonder, I know Mark had said since time passed, I was going to make that move whether we were a good team or a bad team if John was willing, and Jack kind of knew that. But I think it's pretty clear, it was getting ugly. I think the expectations for this team are going to be stupid because factoring in two things. They made the playoffs last year. They beat the Chargers in a must-win game. And, they did it with an interim coach. The difference, you would say Josh is a huge upgrade. One thing that was pretty clear with Rich, Josh is going to be the play caller. So if he can just bring his play calling ability, that's an upgrade. Josh is one of the best play callers in the league. But you would say one of Rich's redeeming qualities was he was an excellent just leader of the program. And you would say going back to Josh and just the New England guys in general, not their GMs. Their GMs are proven to be fucking wheelers and dealers. Casario, Ziegler, Jason Light, my guy J-Rob in Tennessee. I mean, their
Pioli?
GMs. Actually, Pioli kind of resurrected his career with Dimitrov.
Dimitrov was a dealer. And Dimitrov.
So Belichick clearly tells those guys some stuff. He doesn't teach his coaches. So to me, can Josh? Now I would say this: they haven't played anything. It does feel like Josh pretty comfortable in his own skin when you just watch him
agree.
Sit down with Chris Sims or whoever just in these settings. I saw him on with Dan Patrick, and it was like maybe he figured this out because this is a different guy, and if he's that guy, then he'll be rich. But that to me is a question until you see it. But I'm not talking shit at all because he does feel like a different person than Brian Flores, who I had so many people tell me after the combine, man, the stories we were hearing from the Miami people, glad to get him out of the building. Patricia, people couldn't stand him. Joe Judge completely over his head. Josh has a redeeming quality. Like Flores. Flores can coach D, Josh can coach O. The question with these guys is can they remember Patricia was telling the reporter to sit up straight. It's what do you even do? Patricia, you look like a slob.
Yeah, what are you talking about, bro? You don't use that pencil.
Josh doesn't feel like that right now based off the interviews I've seen him. It's just he feels like a very, very he knows what he's getting himself into and he's ready for it, which is a good thing. But I would say the one thing his redeeming quality was just felt like a grown-up in the room.
Yeah, but I mean, to make they need more than that in the AFC. You can't just be solid to make the playoffs in the AFC, right? A grown up in the room stabilizes you a little bit, and they did make the playoffs. But to really compete in this division, especially, you're gonna have to be dynamic. And now it feels like the Raiders aren't just gonna be good. The expectation is they're gonna do it with style points. They're gonna be cool, right? Like that's part of it. I think that's part of the expectation. And you go back, like Derek is going to be an MVP, preseason MVP candidate. Like that chatter is going to happen. He's been one before. I mean, he finished. He finished third in the AP voting for the MVP the MVP voting, I should say, back in 2016 with 28 touchdowns, 6 picks. Because I think people are going to expect. Is he going to a career high for touchdowns this year? I mean, he's through 32 a second year. You'd say if he gets 31 and 8, that's a pretty good year, right?
I would say in the modern day of football, I think, if you're going to be a 35, $40 million quarterback, I mean, I think 35 to 40. Now, if Davante and Darren Waller play every game, I think could they not have 24 touchdowns between the two of them? Like they both feel like double-digit touchdown guys. And Renfro's a 5'6" guy, so boom. All of a sudden you're in your low 20s with 2 guys, and then you're already at 26, 27 with 3 guys. To me, that's pretty realistic. I mean, he's a top 3 tight end. The best
Renfro
wide
was 9
receiver
last year.
To me, that number comes down a little bit with Davante. But, because to me, Davante is going to take some of those.
I agree, but doesn't it feel like Renfro actually in the red zone, Josh is going to like him?
Yeah. But I think he's going to like Waller and Davante a lot, too.
yeah, I mean, you're right. It's how many
but
somebody
think,
in the stream
think about like
the
once Ruggs thing happened, and remember Waller missed a bunch of games, like Derek.
Yeah.
It was actually pretty crazy how dominant Renfro could be. It's like, hey, guys, he's their best fucking player. I would try to cover this guy, and he was killing people. If Renfro gets 9 touchdowns with these 2 guys, I mean, are we talking about 38 touchdowns? Because to me, Davante's got 10. Like he's thrown to Davante. And Waller's just such a good player. Like, health is a question with him after last season, but you would say if Darren Waller gives you 14-plus games, he's getting you 7, 8 touchdowns minimum, right?
Before we go any further, let's tell the people about butcherbox.com/ham.
Sign up at butcherbox.com/ham. Get 2 pounds of ground beef free in every order for the life of your membership, plus a $10 coupon.
Each box contains 8 to 14 pounds of meat, depending on the box you choose. That's enough for 24 individual meals.
I think I'd say 35 touchdowns feels realistic.
I think it's realistic.
What do the Patriots also do? They throw little wheel routes to running backs a lot. That's a Brady special.
For 32 yards.
Yeah. Screen passes.
There's going to be some trick plays in there. Derek's going to lose. There's going to be a touchdown or 2 that the Raiders will throw that won't be Derek that threw it, right? Josh loves a couple of those.
Yeah, to me, if Davante can throw, they have a double pass on like a guy running back. Like Waller pretends to block, quick screen, then Waller goes and he throws across the field deep to Waller, something like that.
Yeah.
That's a Patriot special.
But I think this is the point of like the overarching conversation right now with the Raiders for the next several months is going to be not are they going to be good, but how good can they be, right? In a division that's just really tough. Like on this question comes, where did this go on the stream? From Marcus. Raiders over under 10 wins next season. If it's under, is it a failure? I'd say it's a failure because 9 wins doesn't get you the playoffs in the AFC. So yes,
I'd also say it feels like a failure. They won 10 games last year when their coach got fired on Monday night. They had their star wide receiver killed someone, is in jail, and they figured out a way to win 10 games. Now, it was
10 is the new 9.
10 is the new 9. Now you add Davante Adams and Chandler Jones. Now, to me, you don't need to win 13-14 for it to be a success. Like, you could go 10-7 and be a wild card team, given the division. That would feel successful and look better. Like, you could look like they didn't look. They really made the playoffs on grit and kind of craziness and just remarkable will, right? They could make the playoffs this year 10-7 or 11-6 off way more talent and like, damn, right? But have a very similar record.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, they won multiple overtime games, Guy. Wasn't it the Cowboy game, the Browns game? I think they were 4-1 in overtime last year. I remember hearing that stat late in the season.
What was the Zay Jones touchdown? Was that an overtime or regulation touchdown?
To who?
The like pop pass to Jay, not pop, but I guess like the high lofting touchdown walk off to Zay Jones. What game was that?
It's a good question.
Early in the year.
No, it would have been later in the year because Zay was right.
Oh, I guess post Ruggs. You're right. It would have been right after Ruggs.
I don't know.
But here's who they play next year. Okay. Obviously, the division, which to me, I do think they'll beat the Broncos once. They'll beat the Chargers once. I expect that. At least. They play the
Oh,
Jags.
you're right. It was Ravens.
Oh, the
Week
Raven.
1.
Oh, was that Monday night? Was that the opener?
Yeah.
That was a hell of a God. That was crazy. They play the Texans. They play the Colts, who don't have a quarterback. Home games. They play the Cardinals at home. They play the Niners at home. They play at the Titans. They play at the Seahawks. Okay, they don't have. I mean, they're gonna. You and I are both low on the Seahawks. They play New England at home. They play at New Orleans. They play at Pittsburgh. I mean, they're going to be favored in a lot of these games. That if you had said a year or two ago, they're going to Pittsburgh, they're going to Seattle, those games feel different than they feel right now.
I agree. Yeah.
So over 10 wins. I mean, but they're just the expectation is going to be really high.
Now the major difference is last year they swept Denver, and I think both times they went into Denver, the Raiders felt like they had the better team. That's not going to feel that way anymore. And while they split with the Chargers, I think a lot of Raider fans didn't take the Chargers that seriously. Like, the Chargers are going to be taken more seriously this year. I mean, they have one of to me, the Chargers have a top 2 or 3 roster on paper right now. Now, that does not, their franchise and their head coach, you know, I'm not a Brandon Staley guy, but their roster on paper is fucking unreal. And part of it is like they still, even with all their moves, they still have their first-round pick. So if they can turn that first-round pick where they miss the playoffs, what if they could move back 3 or 4 spots and maybe add another pick? Like, all of a sudden, they could have several draft picks to go along with their running back their offense. They need to add a bigger back. They added Khalil Mack, a defensive tackle from the Rams who's good, and J.C. Jackson. So their defense is just going to be better. And their quarterback just gets better. Yeah. So it's just, you know, in that game, for example, the game they won, which was, you know, one of the most dramatic games of the year, right? That Week 18 game after the Niners had just beat the Rams. That was sweet. Little stretch of football there for about 8 hours. Put this into context, because I think a lot of Raider fans answer, oh, Herbert, and we get this a lot. You guys just, and it might not even just, I think people, if you're not you feel he gets overhyped. That game that the Raiders won 35-32 in overtime. Derek was 20 of 36 for 186 yards. Sometimes I forget this, but when you look at the numbers, Herbert threw 400 yards. I think Justin in that game it was not his fault. You know, I mean, his defense was a joke, and his coach was reckless. The Raiders won the game, and you know, benefited from being at home. Now, you could argue if that game would have been SoFi, I probably would have been a heavy Raider fan too. But I just think that team is like. But my point is, those games against the Chargers and the Broncos, the margin for error was already small when the Chargers and Broncos weren't playoff teams. It's just going to be very, very difficult. And you'd be like, well, the Chiefs haven't done that much, which is kind of true. But
Juju for 2.7 or whatever that number is.
But the other thing is, Guy, them Kansas City Raider games were, one game was 48-9, and the other was 41-14. So you do the math. That's about 89. 9 and 14 is 89-21 is the total score.
Okay.
So if you know the analytic guys, they like to do point differential.
Yep.
Pretty big gap there.
That's not good.
That's a lot of points to shrink.
I think that Josh McDaniels and Derek Carr should be a good match. And the Davante thing, but you know, in terms of, they're going to have a lot of expectations on him. Derek's going to have high expectations. Josh is going to have, there's no honeymoon period here, I don't think, for Josh McDaniels. And I think they at least have the background to be prepared for it. I mean, Josh last was a head coach in 2010. It was a long time ago. I mean, Derek Carr was redshirting at Fresno State that year. And you and I know this, but Derek didn't redshirt his first year. He redshirted his second year at Fresno State. But that's how long ago it was. So that's how long it's been. Josh has been back to an assistant coach, waiting to become a head coach again. My point is, he's been waiting a long time. He's been through a lot. I would think he's going to be pretty deliberate. Derek, been in the league now 8 years. Finally played in a playoff game for the first time this last year. Like, these guys are both in positions to be able to handle expectations. Even though the Raiders have not, and Josh McDaniels as a head coach have not dealt with years and years of expectations and that kind of pressure. But I think when you've been through a lot of failure or waiting for your chance, working for your opportunity, all that kind of stuff, there's the possibility that you are ready for these types of things. So in theory, these guys should be ready to kind of do this together, and they should be comfortable with one another, given that they've both been waiting for this, to have this opportunity in front of them.
Well, you would say that Josh and Davante knows what it's like at the peak of the, top of the mountain, right?
Yeah.
Davante's been on one of the best teams since he showed up in the league. They have been in several NFC championship games. He's never played in a Super Bowl, but he's been right there, right? Several times, and in playoff game, played in a ton of playoff games. And obviously Josh has been part of one of the great dynasties we've ever seen. Now, not as the head lead guy, but as the right-hand man. Like, it was always like Josh was Bill's number 2. It was basically Bill, Tom, and Josh. Like, Josh, always felt like part of the group at the highest part of it, right? And Bill made it feel like that with him, and so did Tom. So
I think the interactions with Tom made it feel that way too. Like the ones that we saw, like clearly there was Tom relied on Josh McDaniels, right?
And it was very
I think it's part
clear.
of what helped Bill O'Brien too.
When you say it was very clear too, now obviously Bill has influence and if he wants a play call, but like Josh was calling the offense, like that was Josh's offense,
right?
And to me, I do think Davante is just. I've seen him in huge games fucking dominate. Like when Davante stepped on the field with Aaron Rodgers, like they had everyone looking at them. He knows what it's like to have a target on your back. He's been a top receiver in the league for half a decade now, right? Every game he goes in, that entire defense has spent the entire week, how do we stop 17? So to me, those two are going. The question is like, I would say Derek would probably say, I felt pressure for my whole career. That's you just naturally do as a quarterback. But this is, to me, a throwback to, I guess he fought it with Gruden, trying to prove his worth to John, right? But that was different than, like, they weren't even getting close to the playoffs up until this year. Remember, they had missed it back-to-back years by, like, several games. It was like, it felt like they were close, but they actually weren't.
I just think, too, like, Gruden turned out to be a roller coaster. His teams. Yeah. Like, it was not, the Raiders are solid. Their low watermark is they're a C+ team, and they're just going to play like that all year long. They were all over the place. They'd be last year. Last year was not a good example, but every year it felt like they're good, they're not, they're good, they're not. What are they? And I do wonder if now there's just going to be a higher baseline of what they are.
Well,
some stability.
But again, so much happened. But the week he got fired, they started 3-0. They beat the Ravens in that crazy game, Monday Night Football. They go and they kind of take it to the Steelers. And then they win a good game against the Dolphins. They're 3-0. Then, they lose to the Chargers. I think it might have been a Thursday night game. Then the following week, they kind of get worked by the Bears. So it's like, what? That was a great example of like, what is going on? You beat the Ravens and the Steelers, and then all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, you're getting fucking punked by the Bears at home.